Hello, and welcome to Cry Havoc Wargames, dedicated to bringing you the uncommon. For those of you who haven't met me, my name is Ron, and today we're going to be bringing you a review of the game Battleforce by Bald Guy Games. So let's get started. Battleforce is a game I've recently been introduced to through Travis's page, Tabletop CP. It is a game created by a friend of his who runs Bald Guy Games. It's available on RPG Vault for free or for whatever you want to pay for it. And it is a small-scale, true skirmish game. Most of it designed around modern wargaming, but as you'll see in a moment, there's a supplement available already for World War II. I mean when I say true skirmish, this is a game where it's designed for a small number of figures, with each person being an independent man with his own characteristics, his own equipment, and differentiated from any other character on the table. Instead of running squads, you're running individuals. That's how it'll differ from, say, Bolt Action or Chain of Command or games like that. I mentioned that the game is available entirely for free. That's true right now for the game and for its first supplement. It's already been supported. Available as a PDF that you can print or have printed. They have come out with Scorpion's Lair, which is an Afghanistan period, early Afghanistan period, linked adventures of 4, designed really to introduce you further to the game, though there are a handful of generic scenarios within the main rules. There's also, just released recently, is Battleforce Behind the Front. This is a campaign book that introduces a few new rules and brings the game into World War II. In fact, the day before D-Day, D-Day -1, some of those special actions by the commandos and American and British paratroopers in taking positions prior to the actual invasion. A few things should be said probably about the game itself. Battleforce is it's a small-scale game, as I mentioned, but it differs from most other games in its system of how its rules unfold. The game is broken down, like many games, into phases, but it's not exactly an I go, you go game. The phases break down into an initiative phase, where you determine who has the initiative for the turn, and that can vary. And there's things you can do to help make it vary. Actions you take within the game can increase your chances of taking the initiative. The initiative is based on a general stat for your whole side. But actions, as I said, that you take earlier will add dice to that roll. And it is random as well. You roll a die and add it to that stat. The next phase is the first movement phase, or what is called the movement phase. Most of the characters have 2 movement characteristics. The commander of the game that I just recently played, for instance, has listed as his movement 8 and 4. What that means is in the first movement he can move 8 inches. In the second movement he is limited to 4 inches. But we'll get to the second movement in a moment. But the first movement he can move 8 inches, and you can move everybody. This is where initiative first matters in the game, is the player who failed to gain initiative moves his first model. Then the character, or the player with initiative, moves his first model. And you alternate back and forth for your initial movements. Then comes the action phase. The action phase is probably the more curious and hard to understand phase of the game. There's a number of things that qualify in action. You can attack, you can shoot, or return fire. You can do Overwatch. All of those things together kind of act like the way Overwatch works in most games. But this is also the phase where you do things. If you were throwing a grenade, it would be in this turn. If you were, I think, I may be wrong about that. But if you were setting demolitions, if you were searching either captives, prisoners you've taken, or buildings, which is something that is called for in the game, that would be done in the action phase. You can choose to assess the battlefield, which is the thing I mentioned earlier. Assessing the battlefield, having at least one of your people assess the battlefield, will help increase your ability by giving you a modifier to your next initiative roll. So that's one of the ways you can also use your unspent money. Actions are things you can take that are done on the battlefield. They can be combat, but it's going to include those things beyond combat as well. That's where that fits in. Then there's what's called reactionary movement. Reactionary movement is what that second movement number is for. It is second movement turn, and you use the lower of the two numbers in your movement score. But unlike the movement turn, on the reaction movement, the person who failed to get initiative moves all of their models, and then the person with initiative moves theirs. It allows you to respond with your initiative to the movement and the flow of the game. And that's what these three turns together are trying to do anyway, is try to bring that more dynamic, flowing feel of modern combat onto a tabletop in a way that most games don't actually do, in my opinion. So that's an interesting system, how that all works. After the final movement phase, the reactionary phase, then comes the actual combat phase. And so that's one of the reasons it's set up this way. You can try to get into close combat. If you get within 4 inches of your opponent, most of your negatives disappear, and you end up very, very dangerous. And it's a way of controlling that battlefield by the use of the initiative you gained earlier. The game does... I mentioned money a moment ago. The game does use scalable characters that you can design yourself. So far, the book itself and the campaign books have come out with pre-generated teams that you can use in the game. But there's also a system of rules that allows you to build and create your own teams using dollars as the modifying effect to handle the point balances and that aspect of the game. Modifiers of the game are all pretty easy. The game is played entirely with D6, but it uses D6 in a sort of backwards way, sort of the way Spectra does. Instead of you having to roll a D6 in a normal fashion, you're rolling a D6 and you're adding stuff to it, and you have to beat a number. So typically, let's say you're shooting. Your shooting is going to be based on a skill. Typically, it's 2 or 3. The higher the number, the worse the skill. You'll get modifiers that will lower your dice roll. So if your skill is 2, that means you have to roll a 2 to hit. If you're firing, the weapons ranges are all based on bands. So each weapon has an amount of inches, which is its band width or length. So for an assault rifle, for instance, it's 14 inches. So anything up to 14 inches is in the first band. If it's 15 to, what would that be, 29, 28? That's the second band. So if you're in that second band, each band over the first gives you a -1 to hit. So let's say you're shooting at second band, that's a -1 to your die roll. If you're shooting, you have a choice of shooting a single shot, 2-round burst, or I guess it's supposed to be a 3-round burst, but or a full auto. That changes what dice you roll, how many dice you roll, I should say, but it lowers. So for selective fire 2, it's a -1. For selective fire 3, it is a -2. So if you were shooting full auto in the second band, you're now at a -3 to your die roll. So you'd roll your dice. Say you rolled a 6, you'd remove the 3, you're down to 3. If you're a top quality fighter, you probably have a skill of 2. And what that means is you have to roll a 2 or higher. So that 3 would be a successful shot. Well, that's basically how most of the skills in the shooting work. Certain things like things you have to do, searching rooms, the deactivating bombs, those add a difficulty score. Again, it's like 1 or 2 typically, which will be added to your skill instead of to the die roll. So let's say you had a skill of 2, it's a difficulty of 1, that takes you, what's necessary is 3 or higher now instead of 2 or higher. There is some rules for dealing with stealth and awareness. It's pretty simple. In fact, in general, the game is very intuitive. The trickiest part of the game is that aspect I talked about earlier, where it works in a different way than most games, and the things you can do with it and the tactical choices that are available to you, particularly in the action phase. Some of that takes a while to really wrap yourself around and understand what you should be doing, should or shouldn't be doing in any given turn. But the game itself is very, very simple, very straightforward. It's free unless you want to be generous and give the man some money, and he deserves it, frankly. Behind the front, the World War II game was a charge. It was like $5. but the rest of these were available for free, or as I said, it's for a voluntary contribution that you can choose to pay. It's relatively a short set of rules. The main rules are, 44 pages or something. So pretty simple. It has some very simplified, some very, very simplified vehicles rules. So vehicles can be in the game, but it's not really a game about vehicles. And so those rules are very, very simplistic in their nature. Casualties are all done by a set of cards. There is a system if you don't like cards. I personally like playing with cards, but I hate having to make them. But there is a cards that can be made to go with the game, and that's how you will do your damage. All the damage is broken between green, yellow, or red, and you simply pull a card of the suitable color type, and the top of it tells you what the effects are. You cross-reference if it's small arms fire against people. You look at your defense modifiers, which are whether you're in cover, and it's based upon the armor you may or may not be wearing. And then that shows you where you look on the chart. You just simply read off what the result is. Some of the cards do nothing. Some of them can kill you outright, and that's true of even the green cards, which are the least dangerous. They also break down. They break down into the categories for the defense mods, but they also down below have the series for dealing with vehicles. So you use the same cards for vehicles. There's a fourth deck, and that's the Snafu Deck, and that's for when you roll critical failures. If you roll ones, for instance, a one is always a miss in the game. Even if one was what you needed to hit, if you roll a one, it's still a miss. And certain times during the games, unlike when using skills, when you fail, you will pull a Snafu card, and it'll have various results. A game I just played earlier today, for instance, the Snafu, the random result, was a sniper, which got a free shot, which could have killed my commander. So, it could be dangerous. Generally, I find the game very, very fun. It's very enjoyable. I'm going to find out later. I don't know yet how easy it is to teach other people, but it should be relatively easy with the reminders on how to use those turns. So some charts, separated charts or QRS would be very useful. And to the best of my knowledge, there isn't one yet. I may create one of those for running. I think this would be a very good game to run at conventions, so I may do one of those before I ever do that. I like the fact that it is very instinctual in how you do and what you do. It's got a few little extra rules I haven't mentioned. You can form fire teams. They're not forced. They have to be within 8 inches to form, but they don't have to stay within 8 inches. They don't have to do the same thing. It just activates or alters how they are activated. It allows you to do tactical stacks where you can do the same actions, where one guy's shooting over the other guy's shoulder. That's pretty neat. I like the fact that it allows for that. And so far it looks like it'd be very easy to create your own scenarios for. The one thing I didn't like was how they do that, the point system. Everybody's rated as militia or operational, what their levels of training is. And but when you buy your points, it's also based on these, and it's based on buying a cell or a squad or a team, but that doesn't mean what it would normally. Again, it's just a system for balance. So a team is only, I think it's 3 people, but they all have to be militia level, which means they can only buy from Category 1 skills, Category 1 equipment, and Category 1 specialties. I don't have a problem with that for the most part, except if you're running, say, Taliban, and you're running them as militia, they're all forced to submachine guns, where, of course, they'd be mostly carrying AK-47s. Now, I'm not sure if that's a problem. What I just have been thinking of it as so far is just assuming that they are carrying AK-47s, not submachine guns, but their lack of training and marksmanship ability is why their range band is only 9 instead of 14. I don't know what I think about that yet. Give me a couple games under my belt. So far, it doesn't really bother me a whole lot. So we'll see where the future brings on that. Anyway, the game, I definitely recommend trying it. Like I say, it's free. Why not try it? That's what I was thinking when I did it. I enjoyed it. I'll probably continue to play at least the 2 campaigns. I'm definitely going to play through the Scorpion campaign, and I'll probably do that here on this channel. I think I'm going to do the World War II one as well, since I've already got everything for that. I'm having to buy stuff. I'm just getting into modern wargaming. I've played a few, mostly Skirmish Sandgame before, but I haven't really invested in purchasing my own things for it. So that's relatively new for me in a project I've been working on, mostly aimed at Spectra, but now Battleforce as well. So we'll see how that goes. I do recommend that you at least take a look at this game, give it a chance. With that, thanks for watching today. If you've enjoyed this, or if you've enjoyed this review, go ahead and hit like if you found it useful. If you have any comments you'd like to make, either about this game or about the channel, or have content you'd like to see us look at, go ahead and put that in the comments down below. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. Until next time, cheers.